country.
But Alex, let me make a small case for democracy and see what you would say. Why can't you, we live in a democratic society with freedom of speech, why can't you take to the hustings, persuade your fellow citizens that taxation is unjust, and try to get a majority?
I don't think that people should have to convince 280 million others simply in order to exercise their own rights, in order to not have their self-ownership violated. I think people should be able to do that without having to convince 280 million people.
Does that mean you're against democracy as a whole?
No. I just believe in a very limited form of democracy, whereby we have a constitution that severely limits the scope of what decisions can be made democratically.
All right, so you're saying that democracy is fine, except where fundamental rights are involved. And I think you could win, if you're going on the hustings, let me add one element to the argument you might make. Maybe you could say, put aside the economic debates, taxation. Suppose the individual right to religious liberty were at stake. Then, Alex, you could say on the hustings, surely you would all agree that we shouldn't put the right to individual liberty up to a vote?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why we have constitutional amendments and why we make it so hard to amend our Constitution.
So you would say that the right to private property, the right of Michael Jordan to keep all the money he makes, at least to protect it from redistribution, is the same kind of right with the same kind of weight as the right to freedom of speech, the right to religious liberty, rights that should trump what the majority wants.
Absolutely. The reason why we have a right to free speech is because we have a right to own ourselves, to exercise our voice in any way that we choose.
All right. Good. All right. So there we all right. Who would like to respond to that argument about democracy being okay, up there. Stand up.
I think comparing religion and economics, it's not the same thing. The reason why Bill Gates was able to make so much money is because we live in an economically and socially stable society. And if the government didn't provide for the poorest 10%, as you say, through taxation, then we would need more money for police to prevent crime. And so either way, like, there would be more taxes taken away to provide what you guys call, like, the necessary things that the government provides.
What's your name?
Anna.
Anna, let me ask you this. Why is the fundamental right to religious liberty different from the right Alex asserts as a fundamental right to private property and to keep what I earn? What's the difference between the two?
Because you wouldn't have, you wouldn't be able to make money, you wouldn't be able to own property if there wasn't a socially, like, if society wasn't stable. And that's completely different from religion. That's like something personal, something that you can practice on your own in your own home. Whereas, like, me practicing my religion is not going to affect the next person. But if I'm poor and I'm desperate, like, I might commit a crime to feed my family, and that can affect others.
Okay, good. Thank you. Would it be wrong for someone to steal a loaf of bread to feed his starving family? Is that wrong?
I believe that it is.
Let's take a quick poll of the three of you. You say yes, it is wrong.
It violates property rights. It's wrong.
Even to save a starving family?
I mean, there are definitely other ways around that. And by justifying... No, hang on, before you laugh at me. That didn't work. Before justifying the act of stealing, you have to look at violating the right that we've already agreed exists, the right of self-possession and the possession of, your own things. We agree on property rights.
All right, we agree at stealing,
yeah,
so property rights is not the issue.
All right, but...
So why is it wrong to steal even to feed your starving family?
Sort of the original argument that I made in the very first question you asked. The benefits of an action don't make the action just.
What would you say, Julia? Is it all right to steal a loaf of bread to feed a starving family, or to steal a drug that your child needs to survive?
I think I'm okay with that, honestly. Even from a libertarian standpoint, I think that, okay, saying that you can just take money arbitrarily from people who have a lot to go to this pool of people who need it, but you have an individual who's acting on their own behalf to kind of save themselves. I mean, I think you said from the idea of like self-possession, they're also in charge of protecting themselves and keeping themselves alive. So therefore, even from a libertarian standpoint, that might be okay.
All right, that's good. That's good. All right, what about number 3 up here? Isn't it the case that the successful, the wealthy, owe a debt? They didn't do that all by themselves. They had to cooperate with other people. That they owe a debt to society, and that's expressed in taxation. You want to take that on, Julie?
Okay, this one, I believe that there is not a debt to society in the sense that how did these people become wealthy? They did something that society valued highly. Something that society has already been providing for them. If anything, I think everything's canceled out. They provided a service to society, and society responded by somehow they got their wealth.
So be concrete. In the case of Michael Jordan, to illustrate your point, there were people who helped him make the money, the teammates, the coach, people who taught him how to play. But you're saying they've all been paid for their services.
Exactly. And society derived a lot of benefit and pleasure from watching Michael Jordan play. I think that's how he paid his debt to society.
All right, good. Who would anyone like to take up that point? Yes.
I think that there's a problem here with that we're assuming that a person has self-possession when they live in a society. I feel like when you live in a society, you give up that right. I mean, technically, if I want to personally go out and kill someone because they offend me, that is self-possession. Because I live in a society, I cannot do that. I think it's kind of equivalent to say, because I have more money, I have resources that can save people's lives. Is it not okay for the government to take that from me? It's self-possession only to a certain extent because I'm living in a society where I have to take account of the people around me.
So are you questioning, what's your name?
Victoria.
Victoria, are you questioning the fundamental premise of self-possession?
Yes. I think that you don't really have self-possession if you choose to live in a society because you cannot just discount the people around you.
All right, I want to quickly get the response of the Libertarian team to the last point. The last point builds on, well, maybe it builds on Victoria's suggestion that we don't own ourselves. Because it says that Bill Gates is wealthy, that Michael Jordan makes a huge income, isn't wholly their own doing. It's the product of a lot of luck. And so we can't claim that they morally deserve all the money they make. Who wants to reply to that? Alex?
You certainly could make the case that it is not, their wealth is not appropriate to the goodness in their hearts, but that's not really the morally relevant issue. The point is that they have received what they have through the free exchange of people who have given them their holdings, usually in exchange for providing some other service.
Good enough. I want to try to sum up what we've learned from this discussion, but first let's thank John, Alex, and Julia for a really wonderful job. Toward the end of the discussion just now, Victoria challenged the premise of this line of reasoning, this libertarian logic. Maybe, she suggested, we don't own ourselves after all. If you reject the libertarian case against redistribution, there would seem to be an incentive to break into the libertarian line of reasoning at the earliest, at the most modest level, which is why a lot of people disputed that taxation is morally equivalent to forced labor. But what about the big claim, the premise, the big idea underlying the libertarian argument? Is it true that we own ourselves? Or can we do without that idea and still avoid what libertarians want to avoid, creating a society and an account of justice where some people can be just used for the sake of other people's welfare or even for the sake of the general good. Libertarians combat the utilitarian idea of using people as means for the collective happiness by saying the way to put a stop to that utilitarian logic of using persons is to resort to the intuitively powerful idea that we are the proprietors of our own person. That's Alex and Julia and John and Robert Nozick. What are the consequences for a theory of justice and an account of rights of calling into question the idea of self-possession? Does it mean that we're back to utilitarianism and using people and aggregating preferences and pushing the fat man off the bridge? Nozick doesn't himself fully develop the idea of self-possession. He borrows it from an earlier philosopher, John Locke. John Locke accounted for the rise of private property from the state of nature by a chain of reasoning very similar to the one that Nozick and the libertarians use. John Locke said, private property arises because when we mix our labor with things, unowned things, we come to acquire a property right in those things. And the reason is that we own our own labor. And the reason for that, we are the proprietors, the owners of our own person. And so in order to examine the moral force of the libertarian claim that we own ourselves, we need to turn to the English political philosopher John Locke and examine his account of private property and self-ownership. And that's what we'll do next time.
Don't miss the chance to interact online with other viewers of Justice. Join the conversation, take a pop quiz, watch lectures you've missed, and learn a lot more. Visit justiceharvard.org. It's the right thing to do. Funding for this program is provided by... Additional funding provided by